All right. Welcome, everyone, to another podcast, another Blab here. Excited about the engagement of Blab and so happy you could join us. I wanted to introduce myself, first of all. For those of you who don't know, my name is David Joannis. I'm the founder and president of Within Reach Global. It's a nonprofit missions organization that is reaching unreached people groups in urban and rural settings in Southeast Asia, specifically in China, where I've been for nearly the last 20 years. You can check our website there, withinreachglobal.org. And I also blog a lot at davidjoannis.com, everything missions. Been living in China for the last, like I said, nearly 20 years. And throughout the years, I've got a chance to meet a number of really amazing people. Steve Knudsen, who I'm with here today, welcome, Terrell, is actually one of them as well. And we're going to be talking about a conversation I think is very powerful because in my many years in the missionary venture, missionary care, it's something I didn't experience, I think, as much as I could have. We're going to get into that. It's going to be exciting. But first of all, wanted to introduce Steve. Welcome, Steve. I'm glad you're here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, we're actually both in Chiang Mai, Thailand at the moment, and Steve is actually the regional member care coordinator, excuse me, here in North Asia for the Evangelical Alliance Mission, and I could go on and on. He's got just a list of all your past experience, specifically in missions and member care and missionary care, but I wanted to say also that since, Steve, 1990, you've been doing church planting of some kind?
Yep, church planting and training, the first about 8 years, and then since then, about the last 17 have been member care.
Wow, great. Well, why don't you go ahead then and introduce yourself, fill in the gaps where I missed.
Okay, well, I went to the Philippines in 1985. I happened to meet my wife on the way, so we met at a cross-cultural orientation course. We corresponded for 2 years without any phone calls, without any visits, and then she came to the Philippines. We got engaged, returned to the U.S., got married, and came back together to the Philippines in 1989 with our first child, only 2 months old, and began church planting. And then small Bible school was in the process of being started. We took that over. Weren't able to finish off that church plant, but we had some Filipino Bible school students that could do that. And so we felt it was more important to empower many students. So we were involved with the school for about 6 years. Turned it over to a Filipino, and then about that time, the mission asked if we would begin doing member care for all of Bethany's missionaries in Asia. And so Bethany International is actually our sending mission. We are on loan from Bethany to TEAM, the Evangelical Alliance Mission, and we've been based here in Chiang Mai for about 4 years now.
Awesome. Great introduction. And obviously, Steve is also leaving out a number of different gaps that I think are quite powerful. The reason as I was thinking about doing this Blab conversation, I thought of you, Steve. Okay, by the way, it says I can hear you and see, but this is a new platform, so hopefully I didn't create any problems. No problem, John. Yeah, you don't actually need to call in. By the way, if anyone would like to call in and share some similar thoughts on this conversation, there is an open seat. You click call in, and we'd love to have you converse as well. But if you're viewing, you could just go ahead and watch. If you're viewing from your browser, sorry, Steve, to pause this again, you might want to refresh, sign into Twitter, and then you can engage a lot better. By the way, on the left-hand side, you could tell a little bird, tweet out to your followers, share on Facebook. It would be awesome if everybody go and share this, because we're going to be sharing some things that I think are really exciting, practical ways you and your church can care for your missionaries. I think a lot of missionaries have not experienced the depth of member care and missionary care. Steve sows into the lives of people who I think are, excuse me, very blessed to have someone who is constantly sowing his life and his wife's life into. So, all right. Actually, Steve, I'm going to move over to another browser here. Hopefully this doesn't create a problem, but I lost your videos feed, so let me. You see me there?
Okay, I see you, David.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I have an issue on a different browser, and this is a little better for me. All right. Okay. So, Steve, tell us. Okay, you do member care. You do missionary care. Would you call it member care or missionary care these days?
We call it member care still.
Member care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Partly because we visit red zone countries where the word mission is not used, and so that's just a more generic, safe word.
I see. Okay. So, yeah, obviously you're in a region that has a hostility toward Christianity. You're obviously not going to be able to mention the names and places and faces of the people you go to and countries you travel among. But what is it exactly that you do? What does member care or missionary care actually mean?
Well, it's our goal is to promote resilience in people. Everybody is going to experience trials at some point, whether they're on the mission field or not. But
sure.
The mission field presents its own set of stresses, and so we try and do proactive things like trainings, just to prepare people for the difficulties, and then when people have struggles, we do try and find the resources to help them. That might mean a book. That might mean referring them to a friend on the field. We try and be as unintrusive as possible, but it might go all the way to recommending that they return to their passport country for a time of restoration and refreshing. So, and everything in between. Chiang Mai, the reason we were based here in Chiang Mai is because it's such a wonderful place, sort of an interim for, there's counseling centers, there's vacation, there's medical, good medical facility here, as you know. So we try and do as unintrusive as possible intervention when it's needed.
Intervention because missionary attrition and missionary burnout is a real thing, right? Absolutely.
And we try and stay ahead of that.
Sure.
We try and nip it in the bud. So our policy in the team is we have a network of what you would call lay counselors or lay facilitators in each of the different fields that we visit, and they kind of keep a pulse on what's going on the field. If they see something that they feel might develop into a problem, they would just consult with us on that. We'll let them know what kind of resources might be available, whether that's something to be concerned about or not. That we're sort of their first go-to if they see some things.
Awesome. I recently had a conversation with a man named Paul Cowell. He runs the Christian Hospitality Network. You've probably seen one of the getaways. Actually, Kendall, you're here, right? You could chat if you hear me okay. Kendall helps hosts. Oh, he's already given me props there. By the way, at any time, if you agree with Steve or just like the way I look, you could go ahead and click on our faces and give us props. It's basically saying I agree with you or I like you for some reason or another. But he hosts these getaways. People like you, Steve. What can I say? You're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you. Well, anyway, Paul oversees the Christian Hospitality Network. And Kendall, who just messaged there, Thai Cobb 3, has had a big part to play in that here in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I had a recent conversation with him about the importance of preventing missionary burnout. Okay, it was a similar conversation, but one thing he said to me struck me because I'd never really thought about it before. He said the best missionaries are those who need a break first. Obviously, you can't just say he's the best, he's the worst. Some are self-proclaimed worst missionaries ever, aka Jamie, if people know about Jamie, the very worst missionary. But I do agree with what he's saying. Those who are on the forefront, are on the cusp of something big, or are putting themselves in a precarious, risky situation as a mission, as a family on mission, those are the people who have a tendency to burn out quickly if they don't have member care.
Mm-hmm. And in those kind of high pressure situations, David, some on some fields, the field mandates that they leave the country every 3 months. And
wow.
So that's a form of member care, that they realize the pressure they're in, maybe politically or just ethnic tensions, that you need to get out of here. And even Mother Teresa mandated that her nuns that worked in the slums have a certain amount of time away every day, every month, every year. And so we need to do that too. We need to be proactive in seeing when people are under stress or in stressful situations. Yes.
I remember a statement by Lottie Moon. Hey, thanks, Retrofit Austin, for following me on Blab. Lottie Moon said this, oh man, this was years ago. I don't even know what year she said, in 40s perhaps, maybe 30s, said, "I pray that no missionary will ever be as lonely as I have been." You obviously, Steve, you're going to run across this. One of the many myriad of scenarios that a missionary will face in a cross-cultural scenario and situation. You got language, you got cultural differences, you got dress differences, historical backgrounds. You're totally out of place. You're in a foreign environment. By the way, this is a great conversation for Pastor James Johnston, who is on here. Are you here, James? Because he's getting ready to move to China soon. Awesome. So, this is what we were actually just recently talking about. You run across all these different things all the time, Steve. You say nipping it in the bud before someone gets burnt out, frustrated with their missionary calling. What are some actual practical ways? Then why don't we just go ahead, jump right in, that people or their churches can care for their missionaries?
Well, I was thinking about this, and they need to start with a good screening process. If you're going to support a missionary or your church is going to get involved, you really need to know that they're called, that this is not just an adventure and an excitement that takes them into the world, and then they get out there and they realize that was in the flesh, and I didn't really hear from God on that. So we need to, as best as possible, determine that these people are definitely called. And once we have that sense of confirmation, then we begin to move forward with them in exploring, okay, what's the next step? And so for me, that the next step would be training and preparation, orientation, good screening from a member care perspective. The missions that we've worked with, they have a very extensive psychological screening, personal history. Doesn't mean that if somebody has had struggles in the past that they can't go, but we want to make sure that they're as strong as possible, that they've dealt with any skeletons in the closet, and everybody knows that we're on the same page and we know what we're dealing with. So we just want them to go healthy. Exactly. And this is something that I think, well, for my experience, for example, I was with Teen Mania Ministries, that was 19 years ago as an intern, had already been to China once, wanted to go to the mission field. I did not go through an organization. My home church didn't have a sending opportunity. Teen Mania didn't have long-term opportunities. So I bought a one-way ticket and went. Not the most ideal situation. And look, Steve's cringing already. Yeah. We see those casualties all the time out here, David. Yes. Yeah, they're the misfits, the ragamuffins, and myself included. But there is this strong sense of calling, right? Although my personal experience was not perhaps the most recommendable, I've obviously sensed God's hand upon my life. And another conversation that I'm going to get into at some point with someone down the road here on Blab is what kind of people God calls as missionaries.
There is this misconception, I think, especially back home, when I go to the churches, I stand up on stage and all hail the wonderful missionary from China. Well, I know the reality. I'm just some homeschooler kid from Prescott, Arizona, and I have my issues and struggles. And but that screening process is huge. Let's say now someone is on the mission field, though. Basically, it looks like I'm seeking missionary care from you right now.
Exactly.
I need it. So they've been there for, let's say, 2 years. They're getting tired. They're getting burnt out. Now here's some practical stuff. Not only you, people back home and their churches can actually do for missionaries.
I sort of, in my mind, had three kinds of categories of help.
Okay.
One is, okay, you've decided they're going to go. They've gotten themselves with a good mission agency, so this is not just a church-driven only. We've seen that too, where some mega churches feel like they can do it all. And Team just celebrated 125 years of work in mission, and
really?
All that experience, has created some really strong help for people on the field. That a church that just decides we've got the money, we can do it, and realize a global scene is not something they've been involved with. Some of the political stuff, crisis consultants and management, and those kind of things. They say, "Well, I didn't know anything about that." So, we want to make sure. I would say an agency is a really helpful thing for you as a church, or you as someone who's going to support a missionary. Make sure they've got a good agency and behind them, and a good home church, and then this home church could have a sending team. And so the sending team is somebody to come alongside them as they begin to put things together. Who's going to help them put that car away, sell that car, rent that house, take care of that house, do some of these things that are pressures. They can relieve some of this pressure so that the person has more energy to engage when he gets on the field. The next thing is the pastoral care team that's going to manage them while they're on the field. And this should be a collaboration between the church and the agency. Team has a very strong value to a home church, a sending church, one church that really identifies himself with this single person or this couple. So and they would collaborate then. Who's going to go visit them? Who's going to be in touch with them? Who's going to check in and see how they're doing? So these people don't just become a number. Now the church is supporting 10 missionaries instead of 9. That's one really high value for me, is there's some kind of intimacy in church support and in individual support. Will you write them a letter? We're awaiting a care package from a church that said, we're going to send you something. What would you really like? And so we gave them sort of one of these, go look for all these different kinds of things. What do you
treasure hunt type thing?
Like a treasure hunt.
Or a scavenger
hunt. We're awaiting, some of those kinds of things, and that's fun for a missionary to get something from home.
So yes, it is.
Think about them as an individual rather than just as a number.
I really like that. As you're mentioning all this, I'm sorry to keep putting you on the spot here, Pastor James Johnston, who's viewing from Northern California. I was actually just with him there recently, but it sounds to me like you're talking specifically to him. Am I right, James? I mean, these are some insights that I think we totally miss. Your home church, you recognize, yes, they're our home church, but you somehow feel perhaps a sense of disconnection because when you come back home, you're in Thailand, Steve, and they say, so how is life over there in Taiwan? And you instantly realize that they don't exactly know what you're doing and where you are, and there's not that intimacy that you're talking about. So just to pause you there, I know your mind's running with thoughts here, but I did want to ask, James, when you get a chance, feel free to call in here, because I would love to hear your thoughts from a different perspective, the preparing side, as Steve continues to share. Feel free to call in if you'd like to, or anyone for that matter. Although also you could share this on the side. if you have a question, you push the little slash bar on the far right-hand side to the messages. You could actually ask a question that we will get to and talk about here in a minute. But yeah, feel free to call in if you'd like, James. I am going to put you on the spot. Oh, well, awesome. There he goes. He must have been combing his hair for just a second there.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. As Steve was sharing, I was just thinking of you. And it seems like all these things might be resonating with you.
Yeah, it's definitely resonating, and it's just been this whole process. And to hear Steve talk about just all the things that are needed and in this process, and naming off the house and the car and this whole care. I'm like, these are the practical things that sometimes we don't even really think about needing some of that support, but really it's definitely needed.
Yeah.
And so I what you were sharing was really just really powerful and encouraging to know that, hey, you know what, we don't have to really do this on our own. Even though God calls us, we're doing it as a family. We're doing it as a church. We're doing,
Right. And here's an interesting thing, David. You were thinking about titling this creative solutions. And one creative solution that one church had was, here was a couple going to Myanmar. They were going to be the first couple of a mission in that place. They sent someone along with them because they had a brand new baby. They had like a 2-month-old baby. And so basically this person bought a plane ticket. And I don't know whether the church funded that or not, but they came and they basically held that baby and did whatever needed doing as they got into an apartment. And that's a creative support solution to take the stress off of those people so that they can really concentrate on the needful things of getting engaged in that society.
Yeah. I think if you just realize that we are real people with real struggles, and I mean, just because you move overseas, you change your geographical location does not make you some sort of superhero. You're simply responding to the call of God, small part of a big thing that God is actually doing. I mean, your whole family, James, is getting ready to do this. But if you have some key people practically set up who you just obviously be honest with and say, we need this, that, or the other, these are going to be some powerful keys that will propel you on the mission field.
And that's one of my messages this morning is for people or to focus on a few. Instead of just looking at the picture that the church supports 10 missionaries is, there should be a group of people that will focus on James if he's going to China. And he's going to be their missionary. And they're going to ask him questions. What do you need? What can we do for you? How can we pray for you? And be specific on that, rather than just a general prayer, Lord, bless our missionaries. You're going to need more than that if you're going to be on the field. And so we need people to be focusing on a few, acquainted intimately with a few.
That's actually really good because just over the past 6 months or so, as we've been going through this process, or even longer than this, is really just as we're sharing it with some key people, we're saying, hey, you know what? Can you be available for accountability, encouragement? That we actually set up some time every week at this time, so we don't miss each other, to really connect and feel connected and stuff. So that's good.
Yep. The time when you arrive is the high pressure time. And so if you're still worried about the car selling, if you're still worried about the house renting or something else, and then now you arrive and somebody says you got to find your own place, you don't get much support on the ground. We have what we call onboarding now, is a sort of a new name for a procedure of orientation. And so when you arrive, we want to onboard you well, and so somebody might already be assigned to you. One of our fields, they have sort of a big brother or a big sister, for a couple or a single, and that's your go-to person, and they're going to help you get to the immigration department. They're going to help you get to language school, and so forth. So having that takes some of that burden off you, because you've already had so much pressure for traveling and with family or whatever. You need to be able to focus just on getting settled.
I like that term, onboarding. Within Reach Global, what James is getting ready to head over to, we have something called waterboarding that we'd like to introduce to him as part of our missionary care, member care. No, I'm just joking.
That's awesome.
These are the kind of things that what you're talking about, not waterboarding, but onboarding, that are going to, look, once you get to the, sorry, I took us off topic, but there needs to be a single focus and direction. And it is tough to do and tough to maintain. We don't pack our bags in coffins anymore, ship it on the slow boat to China, arrive there. We have instant access at all times to go home, to revert back to friends, to become homesick or whatever the case may be. But a single focus is the key on the mission field. If you want to do something amazing for God, He has called you. But you do need people surrounding you to, push you out and thrust you into that direction of your calling. So I like those topics.
Here's another thing that would really be helpful for James or anyone like him that is just heading out, is to manage the expectations that the home church and the supporters have of you. We did some orientation for a different mission, and there was a gal that was almost in tears, saying that the expectations is so strong for them to produce spiritual results that she could hardly handle that burden. She said these people are giving $20 a month. It's hard-earned money, and we want to give them something for it. And we told her the best thing you can do is to concentrate on your language studies and your orientation. Tell them stories about what it's like to learn language and what it's like to be in the culture, because that's what your responsibility is now. It's not producing sort of conversions, because if you're really going to be effective long term in that culture, you just need to get in, and you need to set other things aside and just focus on that part of your preparation.
Amen.
That's good, because I think David and I the other day were talking about that. We were just sharing as a family. My wife and I were talking with them, just balancing the unrealistic expectations, and really as we're coming into this, expecting, hey, you know what, God, you have a plan. What is that? You may reveal it a little bit at a time, and we just lean on that instead of coming up with all these ideas or our understanding of what it's going to be like in that country and how things are going to work, because I know, or whether or not certain things are going to work out a certain way. So that way we don't actually get frustrated, because frustration can actually cause a lot of burnout.
Yeah.
What a wonderful thing if the church said to you, James, we know that your first 2 years are going to be pretty much learning language, and so we're going to be praying for you that way. Then you're free to send back reports and updates that sort of catalog that, not trying to figure out how you can get involved in some sort of English ministry to have something to send back, but actually just focusing on Chinese and culture and telling them wonderful stories about that. There's wonderful stuff that you can teach people so that they come along with you. They get to know that language and culture like you do. They can then be praying better for you.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. Have some serious conversations with your sending church about your expectations, their expectations, and just be honest. And that getting those expectations nailed down is going to be a huge aspect of success in your missionary venture. So,
right.
One
more thing, David.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I gave you sort of two teams: the sending team, the sort of care team on the field, and then the receiving team. When they come home for furloughs, or they come home because maybe that chapter of their life is finished and now they're moving into something else. There needs to be people that are focused on being there to sort of catch them as they come, because they've been out of society, they've been out of the culture. They may have had some difficult experiences. We just were involved with some follow-up of the earthquake in Nepal and these terrible blockades that have just caused the economy to come to almost a standstill. Those people are experiencing hardships, that that they will take home with them, and for people to realize that, and to just be there to let them talk and facilitate some things, so that again it's not so difficult to come back home.
I was recently doing a blab with a good friend of mine. His name is Robert Reed. He's been living in Southeast Asia for nearly 20 years. He described what you're saying, Steve, as this, because I say, it's hard to describe how your experience in China was. You come back home, there's a disconnect. You don't know the local recent media happenings, so it's hard to have this conversation. This is what he said. He said, it's like we've gone to Mars and just returned. People have watched a movie about Mars at one time and they're trying to relate, but it's impossible to describe what Mars is truly like for someone who's never been. So there exists a difficulty for missionaries to relate their experiences and for people back home to connect on a deeper level. I thought that was really unique insight. It is tough to explain, and we're talking about multiple facets here with Steve Knudsen here. We're talking about beforehand, having expectations with your local church and your sending agency. We're talking about during, while you're on the field, how to live healthy, how to have someone standing alongside you, and post or interim, we'll call it, the in-between stages of visiting back home, making sure that there's someone there to welcome you, to reintroduce you into a culture you were born into and yet have now somehow forgotten what it's like to be a part of.
Yeah, and James, there's all kinds of resources available to missionaries. For instance, David mentioned this hospitality network. There's also a care network where someone has already vetted a number of homes around the country, and they vet you, make sure that you're a legitimate missionary, and then for, I think it's $15 a night, you can have a place to stay by someone who wants to host a missionary or pastor in their home. So if you're traveling long distances and you need a place to stay, and you don't want to spend $80 on a hotel, here's a family that is sympathetic to your call and wants to feed you and sleep you and feed you again and send you on your way with encouragement. So missionary care people have contact with those kind of resources, and they can pass that on to you.
Awesome.
So Steve, do you have a link for that? How do I find that? I know the chn.org, I just left it on the sidebar there, but where else could James or others find this kind of stuff?
I have it on my computer, but it would take a couple minutes, but I could get it, and you could post it later if you want.
Okay, good. This replay will be available always at this link. I'm also going to create a blog from this because I think this is very powerful. This will be then sent out. It'll be on my website, but also sent out to people with similar interests and passions. So again, if you want to go ahead and share this conversation on either Facebook or Twitter, I think you're obviously going to have in your realm of influence, your sphere of influence, a number of people who are in some sort of stage of the missionary venture. This conversation might be real impactful and powerful to them if you want to go ahead and share that. Yeah.
One more thing, David. My daughter had an interesting insight about discrimination.
Okay.
When she lived in the Philippines, she was put up on a pedestal, and so people just kind of, she was not included in things because she was considered that white elite American girl. Whereas we often think of discrimination as someone thought less of, and they were, disenfranchised from the group. Sometimes missionaries can actually be put on a pedestal and not included in things because people think you are that super Christian, when in fact you would want to be included in things, and you don't want to be treated so differently that you are excluded from community. We all crave community, and so that would be a good value for churches and individuals, to not push that person away as some sort of strange, weird, super woman, but needy people that just want to be included and be a part just like everybody else.
Reverse discrimination.
Exactly.
It's good.
So anyway, yeah, that's an important value.
We just received this care package the other day, kind of a care package, not so much a care package as it was just a box full of Christmas cards. Look at this. When have you received so many Christmas cards in one place? There's probably 40 cards. This is from a church in Prescott, Arizona called Cornerstone. And one woman, her name is Kay, oversees this whole welcome Global Cast Resources. Awesome to have you on here. She oversees this whole process of every missionary from the church, making sure they have handwritten letters. These aren't just like writing Merry Christmas inside. I mean, they're very specific, like Kara's birthday is coming up, Lorna's birthday is coming up, and very detailed information. They know us. I was amazed to get this. I mean, first of all, no one gets real mail anyway these days, maybe during the holidays. But to have this package arrive in Chiang Mai, Thailand, it told me that someone remembers me, that what I'm doing has value. And there are times where perhaps it's our mind playing tricks on us, perhaps it's the world and other things saying, look, you do not have value in all that you're doing. But this was something to remind us that people are behind us. Pretty exciting.
Yes, that's wonderful. And it is a novelty. Some people would say it's a novelty to write a letter or to send a gift, but it's become a rarity. And so rare things are often very valuable. And
so I guess, oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, so, well, I guess
appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. So that was my question for you, Steve. I get a big package of cards, of Christmas cards. Is this what we're talking about, practical ways for you and your church to care for your missionaries? Is that enough? Does that have enough staying power for the missionary from the sending? Is that all they need to do? Send an email, write a card, send their financial support? I mean, how does the staying power impacting the missionary to accomplish that which God has called him to do really happen?
I think that James, it's good you're on here, so we can kind of use you as a sort of pilot project. But you need to have, Jesus had the 3, and he had the 12, and he had the 70, and he had the 500, and each one of them had different levels of intimacy with him. You need to have those kinds of things as well. So I have very close friends that I keep me accountable. I have a little bit wider group that I might be phoning with or Skyping with occasionally. There's the blog list, a little broader group of people that want to hear and occasionally will write in. So you need to know sort of who's on your different value lists and make sure that they know that you're looking to them. You appreciate them for that relationship they have with you, and so just keep developing those kinds of contacts, because that support network it's like the tightrope guy that's walking across the tightrope and he falls into this very strong net. We need that net of contacts, whether that includes church mission committees, good friends, prayer groups, cell groups that have adopted us, and then when you do have a challenge or a hardship, and that network becomes alive, it, and you can bounce just like that tightrope walker. Falls into it and he bounces a couple of times, but he's okay. That's what you want. You don't want to hit hard with no support.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. On this page, our monthly prayer and financial support team page, it's not all about just sending the money. And what I hear you keep resounding with, Steve, is this aspect of relationship. That is so mandatory and needed for the missionary. They're in a different geographical location, undergoing cross-cultural situations that are difficult to explain, but to have a relationship of someone walking alongside them is powerful. Again, it reminds me on this link right here, this image that has really transformed my thinking when it comes to looking for vision partners, or what I used to call fundraising, because it's this image of William Carey's first call to the mission field. 1793, a man came back from India. He gave the message, "I have seen the gold mine of souls in India. Who is willing to be lowered down into the gold mine to dig?" And the voice of William Carey raises up in the back of the room there, says, "I'm willing to be lowered down into the mine to dig, but remember, you must hold the ropes." And I love that imagery of being lowered down at this chasmal opening where there are treasures everywhere. And yet, when you tug on the rope and you find some sort of jewel or have some sort of experience, there's a tug back on the other side saying, "We're here, we remember you, and we're with you in this missionary venture." I think it's a very powerful image that's transformed our whole ministry, I think.
Yeah. Another image is that of somebody who goes to war, and this is a spiritual warfare when you are pushing the kingdom of God out against the kingdom of darkness.
Yes.
And so, someone has assessed that there are like 12 different levels of support that a soldier has behind him in command, control, supply, whatever, medical. There's all kinds of support behind that soldier. Do we have support behind our soldiers?
That's good.
Yeah. So we need to really back up folks and not assume that once they get on that airplane and they've got that support in place, that financial support, that they're good.
Sure.
No, they're not good. There is much more for the supporters to do than just send their check.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to plug in my computer here. It's getting down to the last few bits of juice there. Awesome. Well, if anyone wants to call in and share similar stories, I know we have a number of people here who I think are seasoned veterans, you could call them, on the mission field. I'm just thinking, I'm going to call you out here, Steve Shermer, Silk Road Catalyst, and others. Kendall Cobb, you're on here, and many, many more. These are the kind of things that I kind of wished I would have known in my early years of ministry. Different struggles that you go through alone. Looking back, you think, wow, I really wish someone would have been there to guide me. And I had what was very unique experience, but this was on the mission field, not specifically from a sending church. I had a group of guys, we called an apostolic leadership team there in China. It was how I learned to navigate my way on the mission field in the missionary venture. Again, just going back to what Steve was saying, this is about relationship. In the relationship, you're talking about clear expectations, either from the sending church, the agency, the individual going. Practical ways you could care for your church, having people assigned to and set up through a relationship that are really going to empower them to thrive in their missionary calling. Am I correct in that kind of assessment, Steve?
Oh yeah. You need people there with you.
So James, as you hear all this, I'm sure individuals are coming to your mind. What does this kind of, I guess, as you think of someone else who might be in your situation as well, what would you say to them, or how has this kind of helped inspire or come up with new ideas?
Well, it's definitely brought a lot of confirmation to this whole process. So just really connecting with people, making sure that we really have people around us that really love us, care for us, not every single person, just really being able to gauge the level of relationships like what you were talking about, Steve, just the different levels and our expectations in those relationships, but really knowing who we can actually go to when things get rough and challenging, disappointing, and being able to share our not only our downs, but even our ups, and our successes. But I like what both of you are really sharing. It just is just really practical Christianity and the basis of the church relationally. working together, loving each other, knowing our part, just like what you guys have said. Yeah, we may be on the mission field, but that's not anything more special than another that may be here. We're just, like I've heard David say, we're just a small part of this big picture. And that's what's so important is we keep that understanding. It also makes us a lot more approachable. And like what you were saying, where we're not that outcast, we actually like, oh wow, he's down to earth, he's real, he's just in
He's
another
got an epic beard.
Epic beard. I'm not shaving it until I leave China. It's gonna be like, nah.
You're jumping full force into your contextualized missions.
Well, I gotta have somewhere to actually hide and smuggle it out.
David, let me share an example from my previous career when I worked on ships. A big tanker has when it's loaded, it has very little exposed above the surface. You see the deck house and maybe a little bit of the ship, and so if you were to picture the missionary as that exposed part that is being sent out, but beneath the water, there might be 10 stories of this ship, and they reach down into the very depths of the sea, and that gives it its stability. So a ship that was just all above the water, with nothing underneath it, would very likely tip over. But because so much of it reaches 90, 100 feet deep where waves can't hit it, that gives it its stability. And I think our support team is what really gives us stability and the ability to sort of forge through the waves, as we have depth, and they are part of our
powerful image there. And obviously another thought that comes to mind is these ships that are going through are weighed down with all kinds of freight. And as you are, when there is people alongside you, that depth to it, that brings a stability to it. So, I've really enjoyed talking about this, practical ways you and your church can care for your missionaries. If anyone else wants to call in, I would like to. I know we could keep talking about this all day. I'm not going to make it all day because we've been on here nearly an hour already. But I think this is a riveting conversation that needs to take place more often from missionaries or those involved in sending missionaries, etc. But any final thoughts, Steve, or closing remarks that you have or would like to share?
Yeah, again, for churches and individuals who have somebody that's going out, encourage the missionaries to really be honest with themselves if they need some help. There's help out here, not to think of counselors as sort of someone, it's a punishment if you have to go to a counselor. We like to look at member care as opportunities for help people to grow. And sometimes they get stuck in something and they just can't get past it. And they need a little help to get out of the mud, in a sense. And so look at counseling as a potential growth opportunity rather than as a remedial action that I have to do this because my mission told me. Be active. And we had one leader in one of our fields. His wife was struggling with depression. It was sort of the seasonal affect disorder, SAD. And he said, and it's affecting our marriage. He was the leader of the field. And he said, so we're going to go to Chiang Mai and we're going to get some counseling. I think they only had like 2 sessions. The rest of the time they ran around on a motorcycle and had the best vacation they'd had in 15 years and went back fully refreshed and ready to go. So, just
gives me goosebumps as you share.
Yeah, admitting they had a need and taking care of it, being open and honest with it, not trying to hide it. All of these are just great ways to deal with it.
I really like that, not having a misconception of what counseling is actually like. My wife and I actually recently did when we moved. I mean, we've been in China, her for a decade, me for 17 years at the time. We moved to Chiang Mai, Thailand. It was a massive shift and transition in our calling. And by the way, James, you look like you got a poor signal there. If you need to cut out, don't feel bad. But,
is it a poor signal?
Yeah. Well, as we went through this different transition from China into Thailand, we went and had transitional debriefing at one of the counseling centers here in Chiang Mai. It was the most exciting time that we ever had. What they did is have us write down this list. We actually wrote it on, the receipt paper that rolls up. We unrolled it out, raveled it out about 15 feet and made these different lines all the way across. There was 5 categories, and month by month by month, we listed the categories of the treasures that we felt, the losses that we felt, the people who were involved, the situation that was happening, and the emotion that was felt. And month by month, we went through looking through our computer, all the photos of our life throughout the years. And it was an amazing way of having this transitional debriefing, trying to understand what God was leading us into, a bigger, better thing. But again, we came into it thinking, oh, I'm going to get counseling, better not tell anybody about this. Wherein now, I'm excited to tell people we're getting counseling and I'm going to be healthy and better. And it's been an exciting journey for us.
Yeah, yeah.
If
So,
I could,
go ahead.
I just wanted to share, through this beginning stage, just really as you guys are sharing and being transparent with this process, even though we know that we're going and that we're supposed to be on the mission field, that hasn't changed the thought of, what's next, how's this going to work, some of the maybe challenges and heaviness, because even though I'm shared some of the things that I've shared already, that doesn't necessarily, and it may seem like, oh, okay, there's a lot of confidence, oh, there's faith, but even in the midst of the faith and the real, there's still the real challenges of, man, what's next? Some of the heaviness, maybe the anxieties and the challenges that come with this process. And, and my wife and I, are learning how to actually walk through a lot of this, and our son, as we say, what, we're on the edge of this cliff and we're ready to jump and soar right into what God's called us to do. And so just being able to be real about this whole process, it's, there's some nervousness, but God brings alive inside of us. He knows exactly what's going to bring out the best in us, and that's where I believe what's going to happen for my family there in China.
Awesome.
Yeah. And getting back to what we talked about earlier about people stepping in to help out, takes some of those pressures off, because you have plenty to manage just in the thoughts of taking a family from one country to another into another culture and society. And so if some of these rudimentary things can be handled by others, it gives you the emotional energy to deal with very real stresses that you're going to have no matter what. It's not anything you can really do about it. They're going to be there. But if somebody can eliminate some of the other ones, then you have some energy. If you know that somebody's there on the other side and will help you with a few things, it just lowers that energy level.
That's good.
Yeah.
I have a resource, David. I'm going to hold it up. I'm not trying to sell it, but this book, can you read that?
Serving as Senders.
Yes. And there's another one he's written. I think it's called The Reentry Team. So the idea of having a team that sort of prepares for you, but you could say an arrival team for James. So this book would be helpful for people who want to do sending well. It's not that people don't want to; they probably just don't know how to. And so somebody has actually compiled some good ideas of how to be supportive of and a good sender, rather than somebody says, well, I didn't feel supported. And you said, well, I didn't know, So I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But if you just tell me what I'm supposed to do, I'm gonna jump in. Well, here's somebody who said, this is what you should do.
What's the author's name?
His name is Pirolo. Pirolo.
Pirolo.
Yeah, okay. Neal, Neal.
Oh, whoops, I missed that. But you can check that out. Google that. It's a great resource for missionary care and member care.
Yep.
Awesome. Steve Shermer is giving you props for that one. From Silk Road Catalyst.
Go for it.
Well, I would like to mention, you guys, on the topic of being vulnerable and open here. My family is actually heading down to China today. We're in Chiang Mai, Thailand, going down to China. Not only to China, it seems we always put ourselves in all these very precarious situations. Only 6 months ago, we received a lot of persecution on the border down near Vietnam. I was interrogated for 6 hours. One of our guys was beaten up. The guy who was beaten up by the police is actually getting married, and we're going to officiate his wedding. We leave today. And I'm taking my wife and daughter. This is family on mission, and this is not, let's go on a fun trip to China. I mean, the place that we're going is not the tourist destination. That is for sure. So I would just really request that those of you guys watching live or who will catch the replay, pray for us as we go to China today. Check out a little blog I wrote about it. Getting back to this topic, practical ways you and your church can care for your missionaries. People are going through some deep things, every one of us, regardless of where you are or your definition of who you are. Other people may propose to you. Missionary is an extra biblical term. We are all sent ones. We are all called on mission. But those who have crossed cultures will experience some unique struggles along the way that are going to be hard to define and explain. Missionary care, member care, having someone there beside them is going to be powerful. And Steve, I just wanted to ask you right before we go, how can people either support what you're doing or get behind you and the vision God has given you?
It's the default is always appreciate prayer, but I guess I would go beyond and say, we receive emails from people occasionally that, say, we'll respond to a blog update or something. And of course, that's encouraging to know that somebody has read it, and not only read it, but they respond to it. There's one couple that almost every blog just says, we'll be praying for those concerns that you shared in your blog. That's you feel supported when you have, again, we're talking about this intimacy, aren't we?
Yes,
It communicates intimacy. So I think people who take the extra time, make the effort to make some sort of a connection and let people know, they don't know if that they've, you don't know that they've taken some action unless they tell you. And so I would encourage people to let someone know when they're praying for them, or just catch them on Skype sometime and somehow make a connection.
I like that. A very selfless answer. Well said. I agree. Says Steve. Steve Silk Road, or Silk Road Catalyst. Steve Shermer. Again, you guys, this is something that we're passionate about. We're in the midst of, and we can talk about all day. But I'm going to go ahead and close this off. And why don't I just pray real quick? Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Father, we do thank you, Lord, for calling us to join alongside you where you're passionate about and whom you have a heart for. We respond because of compassion. We respond because of the need. And yet in the midst, you are there in a deep relationship with us. Help us to understand that and recognize your presence at all times, your omnipotence. Also, bring alongside those, Lord, on the missionary venture who would become real intimate relationships with, to walk through and navigate the struggles that may occur cross-culturally, Lord. We just thank you. I bless every one of those who are watching right now live. Also, for those who are going to catch the replay, may this be an inspiration for them to propel either them or their church or the sent ones from their church on to mission and in an inspiring, healthy way. Bless Steve in all that he does as he sows, as him and Alberta sow their lives into those who are on the mission field. I pray that you would guide the way for the Johnston family as they prepare for this great venture and all the nuances and struggles that may ensue. I pray that you would be their Father. So we just, in the end, lift you up. All men and women are drawn unto you, and we give you the glory. Thank you for a small part of the big thing that you're doing. We worship you, God. In your name.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, guys, thank you for being on here. Steve had a great time. James, I'm happy that you called in, and it really brings another level of engagement. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, guys, Steve and David, for being a part of this journey and this process. This is definitely exciting to know that you guys are a part of this and my life and insight. It's been good.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay.
All right, Steve. Well, welcome, Jake. We're actually just getting ready to head off here, but have a great day, you guys, and we will connect soon and pray that God bless all that you do in the missionary venture.
Have a good trip, David.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.